Death of the Doctor was one of many stories I rewatched from the Sarah Jane Adventures when I was younger, with me always and still preferring this story over than The Wedding of Sarah Jane Smith, as whilst yes, both Doctors did get the same screen time, that being the cliffhanger at the end of part 1 and then the entirety of part 2, the 11th Doctor just had a lot more to do here. One heavy flaw of the story is being the fact that of course the Doctor doesn't die in this, but I think the interesting factor is to see the actual story being played out. It's especially interesting to see that Russell T Davies wrote this story, as not only was this the only story he wrote for the show, but it's his chance to write for the 11th Doctor, who had only debuted in his first season 5 months before this. We also see the return of Katy Manning, who reprises her role as Jo Grant after 37 years from her original exit in The Green Death, and unlike Liz Sladen, Katy never returned at all after her original exit, so it was truly so nice to see her again. Today I'll be going into this nice celebration to the 1970s era of Doctor Who, but also its undertoning topic of grief in my review of Death of the Doctor. So the story begins with Luke telling the gang what life is like at university since the character departed at the beginning of the season due to Tommy Knight wishing to focus on his GCSEs. I just love the development Luke gets as a character here, with him making new friends and going to more social events like a band he and a friend Sanjay were going to. Sanjay is never seen on the show, but the character does get an interesting name drop when Luke mentions how the two are happily married together in the 2020 webisode Farewell Sarah Jane. Unit abruptly arrived on Bannerman Road was great, and I love Sarah's innocent dismissal of the Force despite working with them in the 1970s. Sarah's dismissal could be perhaps down to how she doesn't agree with how brutal the Force is now in the 21st century. Colonel Kareem announcing that the Doctor has been found dead was chilling, and I like the quick nod of reassurance Kareem gives herself before delivering the news to Sarah Jane, as if she was worried as to how she'd deliver it, which also brings the whole ordeal to be kind of fishy already. We also get the introduction to the antagonists of the story of the Shan Sheaf, which are an interesting race, being that of intergalactic undertakers. Sarah being quite submissive to everything being shown to her was great, and I love that it's the kids themselves, Rani and Clyde, that respond maturely in this situation. Sarah's irrational behaviour continues as she then judges the Shan Sheaf on their appearances, which were strangely out of character for Sarah Jane, as Rani rightfully says.
Hey, that's not fair. Since when did we judge by appearances?
Sarah's behaviour is very similar to one suffering the first 2 of the 5 stages of grief. The one she is presenting us here is denial and anger. Sarah then agrees to come to the funeral, only to find more of the supposed death, which again links back to the first 5 stages of grief, and she presents the 3rd stage here, which is bargaining. Later in the night, Sarah vents out her scepticism to Luke, and that if she was sure that the Doctor was ever to die, she'd feel it regardless of how far away he'd be. Aresh telling Rani and Clyde of Geeta's own depressive state when her dad died and how she acted quite strangely to cope with her loss was a very great and mature scene for its young audience, and it's good to show the fact that everyone mourns differently. Clyde, being smug before getting into the unit car, receives a blue static shock before Aresh just concludes that it's just an everyday normal static shock, although this certain blue static makes a prominent reoccurrence as part 1 goes on. The trio then arrive for their night of remembrance, with the Doctor's supposed body being in the lead-lined coffin that's there opposite to them. Sarah asks Kareem to see the body inside, although she stresses to Sarah that the body was severely damaged when it was picked up, in which then starts to show Sarah accept his death, with finally acceptance being that final stage of grief. Whilst the Shan Sheaf begin to strum on the harp, Sarah, Clyde and Rani remember their times with the Doctor. Sarah remembers the last time she saw the 10th Doctor, the last face of the Doctor of which she saw as he waved goodbye, alongside remembering the other 3rd and 4th Doctors whom she had originally travelled with respectfully. Clyde, on the other hand, remembers a less fond memory when he recounts the time he was struck with the TARDIS's archer energy accidentally when it was trying to stabilise during the events of last season's The Wedding of Sarah Jane Smith. Jo Grant and her grandson Santiago accidentally interrupting the gathering was hilarious. Sarah and Jo hitting it off instantly as they were both aware of each other though just never met was incredibly sweet. Whilst Santiago is an alright side character, you can tell he was there to fill the Luke spot, or at least be some kind of plot device to present what Jo had gotten up to after leaving the Doctor in unit, of which we find Jo has gone up to all sorts. She has been all around the world protesting for rights, which I found as some brilliant new development for her character. When attempting to catch up with the Grosk that ran off, Clyde, Ron and Santiago later find out the Shanshif's true motives when they hear that the Shanshif find that the memories of the Doctor are strong within Jo and Sarah and wish to drain it from them. The Shanshif find that they've been witnessed and chase them all down. At this point, Clyde begins to go through a biological swap due to the Doctor being able to key into that Archer energy that was left in his body. In comes the 11th Doctor, who leaves Clyde in his spot on a wasteland planet. Ronnie not being exactly aware of who the Doctor is because of his new regeneration was great, and I love the first interactions shown by Jo and Sarah towards the 11th Doctor. And Sarah is just amazed in regards to the new regeneration, and Jo is amazed about how visibly younger the Doctor looks now. The Shanshif eventually catch up to the group and fire a beam of energy at the Doctor to assure that they'll have the death of the Doctor after all. Part 2 begins with Clyde taking back his original spot when the transmap stops working, in which then has the Shanshif stop in confusion. The 11th Doctor calling Sarah by her last name was a lovely nod to how he addresses Amy, the 11th Doctor's companion at that time. Constant swaps between Clyde and the Doctor was quite humorous until then the Doctor whisks Jo and Sarah along with him as he attempts to fix the transmat so Clyde and him can coexist at the same time. Jo and Sarah are amazed about being on an alien planet again, which we find is called the Crimson Heart. This is also unfortunately the last time we see Sarah on a planet ever again due to the show's unfortunate end the following year. Sarah asking the Doctor if his last regeneration hurt was quite interesting, especially because taking into fact that regeneration is that literal process of changing the cells of your own body. The Doctor does brush this off, saying that it always hurts, perhaps not wishing to go into this entirely, but we do find that the Doctor got here in the first place after he was lured to the planet by the Shanshif, who then marooned him after taking his TARDIS. I do appreciate Russell with sticking to the canon of the main series of that. He states that he just dropped the Ponds off on a honeymoon planet after the events of Series 5 for them becoming newlyweds, and it was just all a lovely add of continuity. Jo again brings up the fact that the Doctor never came back for her, to where he sweetly replies that he was never able to properly find her because she was always on the move, but lets in on the fact that he looked down on Jo and her family when the 10th Doctor was at the end of his life, showing that he did come back for her to see her after all, which just gives Jo such lovely confirmation that regardless of the phase, it's still her same Doctor, which I think is just a lovely testament to the characters, and props to Matt Smith, who almost at times really just keys into Jon Pertwee's portrayal for this story. As the trio arrive back home, the Doctor goes to rescue the kids that are currently being trapped inside the vents and are being bored alive. The Shanshif kidnap Jo and Sarah in a very much classic Who fashion, I must add, as the Doctor frees them. Clyde questioning the ability of regeneration to the Doctor as they make their way down the vents, as he is finally able to see the new incarnation, as he asks how many times he can change, to where he jokingly replies with 507 times. Whilst it does go against the original 12, Davies has later explained that it was a joke both on the Doctor's part and his own. Jo and Sarah are now hooked up to the memory weave, as Kareem explains that their own memories of the TARDIS and its key will create a real copy of the key so they can use it, get in and escape. The Shanshif wishing to prevent death was a rather interesting move for a villain, as I think the villain side of them would fall down to knowing of the destruction of which they'd do to time if they did completely remove death. Kareem's motive, on the other hand, for working with the Shanshif is that there was nothing left on Earth for her, which was a subtle but also interesting motive, and that she'd be willing to turn her back on the entire human race to leave to space. The story's execution being that the Doctor tells Jo and Sarah to think of everything, every adventure, every alien, every incarnation, in which then overloads the weave from getting the key, was just such a great moment of the entire show. And I love Clyde and Rani pitching in with getting Sarah to think about their adventures, and even Santiago getting Jo to think about every country they've been to. As the memory weave is about to blow up, the two are trapped inside alongside Kareem and the Shanshif. Sarah and Jo accept defeat before the Doctor reminds them about that empty lead-lined coffin that they then seek shelter in to escape the impact of the explosion, which was quite clever. The Shanshif and Colonel Kareem are left quite brutally to die, with then the cast arriving back in the attic via the TARDIS, in which Mr. Smith informs Rani that they were greeted with a rogue element of the Shanshif and that the wide wing of them apologises for their actions. Jo declining the Doctor's invitation to come back and travel with him, jokingly saying how she'll get him in trouble with the Time Lords like the old days, was such a sweet scene but eerie at the same time, as Joy's not exactly aware of the death of the Time Lords and the falling Gallifrey due to the Time War, which just gave a brief awkward response from the Doctor and even Sarah. The two before leaving then inform the Doctor of their theory of that if he ever died they'd feel it, to where he agrees and even adds that if he did die the world might just collapse, which was some funny RTD writing about, you know, the day that if Doctor Who ever was to be cancelled again. Jo kissing and hugging the gang goodbye was a sweet exit for her, which begs Ronnie to ask Sarah about some of the whereabouts of other companions of the Doctor, to where she lists some of the whereabouts like Ben and Polly, who are now married and run an orphanage in India, Harry, who had worked on vaccines that saved thousands of lives, although the mention of him by Sarah in past tense probably refers to the death of Ian Marter, who unfortunately died in 1986. Tegan became an advocate for Aboriginal rights, and Ace, though said Dorothy by Sarah, has raised billions of pounds through a non-profit organisation, A Charitable Earth, something that the writing team were planning on exploring in the unmade Season 6, but was made canon as happening in Farewell Sarah Jane. Sarah ends off a brief recount with talking about Barbara and Ian, who are also married and are professors at Cambridge University, though there are rumours that have said that they haven't aged since the 1960s, which were all just a brilliant and sweet new ad of companion lore written to by Russell, which I have no doubt in saying that he'll have very much enjoyed writing. Sarah, Clyde and Rani conclude the story by saying that one day they'll be like them brilliant companions the Doctor has met and travelled with over the years, and that they'll all still be fighting somewhere, and just proves that if he did or not, the Doctor would never be dead, as they'd all be fighting in his legacy. Thank you for watching. Let me know what you think of this story in the comments below, and I'll see you later.